Oh, hello. Burns night already. Must be time for the immortal toast. Cheers. Tonight I want to tell a tale of the life of Robert Burns. The tale I tell is without favor or fear of the many turns taken in his life. For I found that he was neither an unrepentant sinner nor a saint. It is in these recent times of strife that I take note in the truths of his writings and hold great admiration that Robert Burns was always ready to forgive his fellow man, as heard in his words, though they may go akin in wrong, to step aside is human. In this, my immortal toast to Robert Burns, I hope to provide a glance into the sadness and the joy of his short life. I want to share a glimpse of what I admire most about Robert Burns, and hope that I leave you a love for both man and poet. And in this, I will attempt to read any quote or verse as I can, translated into modern tongue, so that all may be able to appreciate. I have found during my research that Robert Burns' writings do tell his own tale, whether they be poem, ballads, epitaph, epistle, or song. So with those, let's start with his birth. From Ranton, Rovin Robin. Robert Burns was born when our monarch hindmost year but one was 5 and 20 days begun. 'Twas then a blast of January wind blew Hansel in on Robin. Or as we know it, January 25th, 1759. Born to William Burness and Agnes Brown. Robert Burns had a low and humble birth, not too far from Alloway town. His father was known as William Burns the farmer, and although they were in poverty, William arranged private schooling with John Murdoch for Robert and his brother Gilbert. We know from his poem, Cotter's Saturday Night, that Robert loved to learn, and after the family was forced to move to a new farm, Mount Oliphant, his evenings were spent with lessons both academic and religious from William himself. Moving forward to Robert at the age of 15, while working in the fields, the writing of his first poem, Handsome Nell, his very first love song, inspired by a bonny lass. Oh, once I loved a bonny lass, aye, and I love her still, and whilst that virtue warms my breast, I'll love my handsome Nell. But these feelings soon passed, inspiring the often quoted, A Fond Kiss. Had we never loved so kindly, had we never loved so blindly, never met or never parted, we had never been broken-hearted. At 17, living in Kirkswald, he got his first job as a land surveyor. But 2 years later, he went back to farming. At the new farm, Loch Lay, he earned just £7 a year. As his flax crops grew, he wished to marry a daughter of a nearby farmer. Her name was Ellison Begbie. Not for her beauty, although she was a bonny lass, but she was well educated. The lass of Cessnock Banks. But it's not her air, her form, her face, though matching beauty's fabled queen. 'Tis the mind that shines in every grace, and chiefly in her roguish een. Tragedy then struck. Robert Burns was rejected by the lass, and at the same time his stores of flax burned to the ground. In his misery, he contemplated suicide. But as a man of good sense, he emerged from the gloom and began to find solace and satisfaction in the arms of many different lovers. He also found the love for fiddle and flute and the poetry of Robert Ferguson. Combining these new loves, he wrote songs like Riggs O'Barley and Mary Morrison. Last night, when to the trembling string, the dance went through the lighted hall. To you my fancy took its wing. I sat but neither heard nor saw. Though this girl was fair, and that girl was lovely, and yonder girl the toast of all the town, I sighed and said among them all, you are not Mary Morrison. Robert and his brother rented a farm, and Robert took interest in the church of the time. This interest was more of a hypocritical bigotry, and of course, he satirized that in rhyme. Classics like The Uncle Gid, Holy Fair, Death and Dr. Hornbook, Two Dogs, and Holy Willie's Prayer. Lord, bless thy chosen in this place, for here thou has a chosen race. But God confound their stubborn face, and blast their name, of those who bring thy elders to disgrace and open shame. Lord, ensure Gavin Hamilton gets his just deserts. He drinks and swears and plays cards, yet has so much influence among all the social classes. From God's own priest, the people's hearts, he steals away. At the age of 24, tragedy struck again, with his father in financial ruin and ending in his death, February 1784. His farm was failing, and his lover became pregnant. But rising again in the tradition of Robert Burns, he looked to marry Jean Armour. Jean was the daughter of a stonemason who then spirited her away to avoid any local scandals. Burns' letters from this period indicate that he intended to marry Jean as soon as they realized she was pregnant, but had been discouraged by her reluctance to disobey her father's disapproval of the union. Moreover, at this point, Burns was romantically involved with Highland Mary Campbell, who was also allegedly pregnant by him. But Mary died in October 1786 before she could give birth. Robert Burns was now penniless, but through a connection in his Masonic lodge, his first book of poetry was published in 1786, when he was 27 years old. Called the Kilmarnock Edition, this volume contained a handful of first-rate Scots poems to include Scotch Drink, To a Mouse, To a Louse, and some verse letters addressed to various friends. But this only gave him a mere 20 pounds. Although this was little money, he renewed his love of Scotland and regained his native pride. Robert Burns was called to Edinburgh, where he quickly found fame. They thought of him there as a man of great genius. He published a new book with writings of everything about Scotland, and this became an immediate success. He was able to return to Jean Armour and won her father over as no longer a penniless plowman, but a favored poet and mason. With some satire, Robert Burns unfavored this turn and gave his soon-to-be father-in-law time to reflect, and went on a tour of the Highlands. He did return in 1788 and at last married Jean. While building a home for them in Ellisland, he wrote a beautiful love song in honor of Jean. I love my Jean. Of all the airts the wind can blow, I dearly love the west, for there the bonny lassie lives, the lassie I love best. There's wild woods grow and rivers roll, and many a hill between, but day and night my fancy's flight is ever with my Jean. I see her in the dewy flowers, I see her sweet and fair, I hear her in the tuneful burns, I hear her chime the air. There's not a bonny flower that springs by fountain, shaw, or green. There's not a bonny bird that sings, but minds me o' my Jean. To continue the tale, it should perhaps be titled The Tragedies and Contradictories of Robert Burns. The farm at Ellisland failed, and he took work as a tax collector. Riding on horseback 200 miles every week, he made up songs as he rode along. These songs are still sung today, such as Afton Water and Auld Lang Syne. With more time to think about his life, he recalled his love of Highland Mary, and early one morning by starlight, he composed To Mary in Heaven. Thou lingering star with lessening ray, that lovest to greet the early morn, again thou ushers in the day, my Mary from my soul was torn. In 1790, Burns met Douglas Graham, who lived at Shanter Farm near South Ayrshire, and in a day wrote a unique epic which became one of his most sustained poetic efforts, Tam O'Shanter. When the peddler people leave the streets and thirsty neighbors meet, as market days are wearing late and folk begin to take the road home, while we sit boozing strong ale and getting drunk and very happy, We don't think of the long Scots miles, the marshes, waters, steps, and stiles that lie between us and our home, where sits our sulky sullen dame, gathering her brows like a gathering storm, nursing her wrath to keep it warm. This truth finds honest Tam O'Shanter, as he from Ayr one night did canter, old Ayr which never a town surpasses for honest men and bonny lasses. It is now 1795, and Robert Burns, father to 11 children, born by 4 women, and promoted to excise supervisor, became known for collecting Scottish folk songs and becoming a songwriter. As his worldly prospects grew, so did his political views. He freely expressed sympathy with the French and American revolutions, was an advocate of democratic reform, and joined the Royal Dumfries Volunteers. With influence from a Jacobite song, he wrote a spoken song, "A Man's a Man for All That." Expressing the ideas of republicanism that arose in the 18th century, this song also shows his belief that honesty is much more important to one's worth than clothes or which foods a man eats. A prince can make a belted knight, a marquis duke and all that, but an honest man's above his might, God faith, he must not for all that. For all that and all that, their dignities and all that, the pith of sense and pride of worth are higher rank than all that. Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that, that sense and worth over all the earth shall bear the gree and all that. For that and all that is coming yet for all that, that man to man the world over shall brothers be for all that. Robert Burns now lived in Dumfries in a 2-story red sandstone house on Mill Hole Brae, now Burn Street. Life was good, but he had worked and labored too hard, and his life took another tragic turn as he fell ill. Although from this he did recover, he now found himself in financial jeopardy once again. He wrote letters to friends and family asking for help, but his health continued to fail, and Jean was confined to bed in their home with her 7th pregnancy. One day, when Burns was ill and appeared to be sleeping, he observed Jessie Lewers, his nursemaid, moving about the house with a light step so that she would not disturb him. He took a crystal goblet containing wine and water for moistening his lips, and with a diamond inscribed upon it, "The toast," and presented it to her. "Fill me with the rosy wine, call a toast divine. Give me the poet's darling flame, lovely Jessie be the name. Then thou mayest freely boast, thou hast given a peerless toast." On the 21st of July, 1796, Robert Burns died at the home of rheumatic fever. Soon after, Jean Armour gave birth once more to a son. All of Scotland mourned his passing, and thousands gathered to pay their respects. Robert Burns was now free from toil and strife. It was now 262 years since Robert Burns was born, and we appear to be no nearer to the future life he had hoped for and wrote about. But we today, as we keep his memory, let us keep his hope alive for a better world. I sincerely echo his prayer that someday it will be here. Let us hope together that it will come, as come it will for all that, that sense and worth over all the earth shall bear the gree and all that. For all that and all that is coming yet for all that, that man to man the world over shall brothers be for all that. Lads and lassies, a toast to the immortal Robert Burns. To Robert Burns.